right. Welcome to Artcasters number 278. And as usual, we have a wonderful guest this week. Actually, I'm really excited about this one. This is a guy who I met years ago, like when I was completely green to comic conventions. And I booked Wizard World not knowing anything about comic conventions, what conventions were indie friendly, how to booth, anything like that. And I met the guest that we'll be introducing at that thing. But before we introduce our guest, we'll just make the rounds as usual. So I'm Joshua Kemble. You're on my channel. If you haven't yet, hit subscribe, hit like, hit the bell, hit all that fun stuff so that you can get notified when we're about to go live. And you can get my graphic novel, Two Stories, on Amazon. It's on sale, which is pretty cool. You can also get it at pretty much any other online retailer, but right now it's at like about half off. And then our other friend of the show, Jim Lujan, friend of Javi too, was like, Javi Vision. Yes, it will be. All right. And then Scott, where can everybody find you before we introduce our guest?
So real quick, I wanted to mention something I heard. I don't know if it's the same for however your books are on Amazon, but I know with KDP, like if Amazon runs a sale, you should still get your same royalty. That's what I heard as far as KDP. So that's what cool. I heard.
That's good.
So
that's
I know you were concerned about that. So you can find my stuff at serkworks.com. And also I'm on YouTube. I have a series on how to make comics called Making Comics 101. It's basically a step-by-step video series tutorial on how to make comics. Everything from coming up with your idea all the way to printing and publishing. Every step in between. It's the most comprehensive course on making comics that you will find on YouTube. I can guarantee that. Prove me wrong if you can. I doubt you can, but it's out there. It's on my website, or it's on YouTube. It's called Making Comics 101. And also, I didn't even realize this was live yet, but let me see if I can, okay, here. The comic lettering masterclass is now available on Design Cuts, and it is on sale for $22, normally $32. And this is basically a masterclass on how to letter comics. So definitely check that out. Just go to designcuts.com. And you might have to search Serkworks because I don't know if it's ranking yet on the front page, but I'm really hoping I'm sourcing that's going to happen, that we're going to get this on the front page and it's going to be a bestseller. So anyway, that's available right now. So,
all right, you guys. Yep. So go check that out on Design Cuts. Serkworks is basically the easiest way to find Scott's stuff. But yeah, let's make that the front page. It sounds like a noble cause. And also, I will vouch for the Comics 101 thing. Scott goes over things that are like, a lot of them are like comics basics, but you would have to take like a whole course to learn these things. And they're all condensed perfectly into like these great learnable tutorials, and just like the little tips on like inking and plotting story. It's good to go back to basics sometimes, and I vouch for that. So now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guest, Javier Hernandez, creator of MUERTO, co-founder of the Latino Comics Expo in Long Beach, which is my old hometown. So and honestly, like, just has worked in film, teaches comics courses, is just like a veteran in the field, and like I said, also was like supported my work like early on when I was like a green cartoonist with my first little 24-page floppy. How's it going, Jav? How you doing? Where can people check out your stuff?
Hey, very good. Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to talking art and comics.
Yes.
Especially late in the evening, because it's kind of nice. I think that's when a lot of us just kind of button down and just start working and drawing. And it's like, I got no one to talk to, but not tonight.
Yes. Cartoonists Unite tonight. All right.
It's a nice song. It's like Benny Mardones or something. Cartoonists Unite tonight. On Instagram, Javier Los Comex. LOSCOMEX. They can go to my shop here, Los Comex Store Envy. I got some of my comic books up there and such. And I got a YouTube channel, elmuerto.com. It's one of the sites, yes. And the Los Comex TV channel on YouTube, which I started, I think, I started it last year, partly because of, pandemic, shutdown, stay home, whatever. Like, okay, something else to do. And how do I, since I'm not going to shows all next year, let me go to you through your video screen. So that was part of the reason for starting that.
I love it.
I didn't know about that. I definitely want to check that out myself.
Oh, thanks. Thank you. Yeah. It's a way, like, again, it's a way to be talking to people, even though no one's there, but you're talking about comics and your work and such. So yeah, it was definitely done as a, inspired by, stay at home. So.
Yeah. We definitely relate to that a lot. The fact that we have Artcasters, and then like I do live streams a lot since the pandemic too, because and maybe we can touch on that a little later. Like I definitely want to get into some of your history and stuff. Yeah, but it has been really interesting, like navigating how to promote books when like almost all of the traditional forms of like promoting indie books are about like in person. And kind of having that off the table, it's been an interesting year for that. But
I'm sure you guys have done this. We've heard this kind of an old joke at this point, but like for a lot of people, people working at home anyway, but particularly cartoonists, there's not too much difference of telling me to stay home and work because we do our comics at home anyway. But the other component, okay, I got to sell these books. That's where I don't have the access to. Seeing people in person, at least, all last year and half of this year. So yeah, that's changing, hopefully.
Yeah, I'm excited about that potential new going back to normal. Sounds pretty exciting to me. All right, well, so Hav, I think that like basically the topic I wanted to hit on was because our last guest on Artcasters was talking about their excitement about like the era we're in having more representation in comics, and was particularly like working on a comic that talked about his Latino identity and also like pulled from a lot of Aztec god myths. And I was like, dude, like my buddy Hav, like is like the guy who like him and like Rody Matteo were like the two dudes like it that I know that were like pulling from like those Aztec myths, like way back in the day, like far before like Pixar was touching that, and I just was like, holy crap! Like speaking about that, I haven't had Hav on Artcasters the whole time we've been doing it, and like.
You've been on, haven't you, Hav? Haven't we had you on?
See, I was telling Josh, I thought I've spoken to Scott, not just in person, but I could swear.
Okay.
I think we've had you on before a long time ago. Yeah.
So maybe it was like long. I think it must have been long ago, but it's been too long. So I was like, I wanted to kind of get into just sort of like kind of going back like to when you started like El Muerto, which is like I think was kind of the first like sort of big hit into the comics industry for you. What did the landscape in comics look like at that time, and like what made you kind of drawn to like sort of pulling from like Day of the Dead and like Aztec myths and stuff?
So the first issue of El Muerto came out in 1998. So it's probably like a 3-year process of working on the first comic. It was just a 32-page comic, but it's like your first big thing. So one page here, and next month I'll do another page, and I got to work. So it was a long, dragged out process. But what brought me to do that was, I obviously, like everybody else, I grew up loving comics, everything about comics. And of course, when I was a kid in the 70s, you had comic books you could buy at the 7-Eleven, but then you go home and TV, there's Wonder Woman on TV, there's the Incredible Hulk, there's Adam West, there's all these different cartoons. I mean, superheroes were everywhere.
Yeah.
The Meagle dolls I played with and everything. So comics were in my blood at that point. So then throughout the 80s, still reading comics. Wow, Frank Miller on Daredevil. And who's this Bill Sienkiewicz guy on Moon Knight? This stuff is amazing. Then the 90s came around, and it's like, wow, some of these Marvel comics are looking really different. That's all I'll say. So, but by that point, I had read so much about the history of comics. You read about who made these comics and what are these companies, and wait, Jack Kirby was treated like how? And wait, Steve Ditko, they say he didn't create Spider-Man? They left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, you know what? I like comics. I want to do comics. I don't think I want to work at these companies.
Yeah.
It's, part of it was just visually, like, the stuff looked terrible. Daredevil without suit of armor. And again, that's just personal taste. And then the behind the scenes stuff, I don't know. It's kind of a dirty business. I didn't really care for that, from my point of view, from what I read, and creators were treated. So, but throughout the 90s, I was like, well, there's this thing called indie comics. Look at all these independent comics. You can make comics on your own. There's companies that are making comics that have nothing to do with the mainstream stuff. So it's like, oh, okay, I got to think about this again. You can make comics, even if you don't want to be associated with all that stuff. So I will just start looking around, like comic shops. Hey, let me go look at the indie section. Oh, look at this stuff. Look at these published stuff and people making this on their own. So I will just try to research what I could back then. Back then, no internet really. So you just go research. You literally go to the store, you buy the comic, you look at it, you read the back.
Yeah.
So me and a friend of mine, Rafael Navarro, he was on a similar path. He had done some stuff at Marvel and DC and such, but he definitely wanted to create his own stuff. And I did too. So for me, like, okay, I'm going to create my own comic. I need a character. And then the other thing was, well, also, you know what? One thing I never saw growing up as a kid, not much, not just in comics, but TVs and everything. I did not see enough Mexican culture.
Yeah.
I should say Mexican American. Obviously, I can watch Mexican TV, plenty of Mexican stuff there. But why is there no Mexican American Latino characters in the Justice League or here or there, or, at least in large numbers? So, okay, I'm going to do my own comic, and I want to do something centered around Mexican American culture or Mexican culture. Back in the mid 90s, I mean, we have Coco today. We have Book of Life, all those great, wonderful Day of the Dead things that have spread it out throughout the world, which is great. But back in the 90s, you didn't see a lot of Day of the Dead represented in particularly, to say, comic books, much less like American pop culture. So I wanted to do something. Okay, I'm going to do something with Day of the Dead folklore. And also, I wasn't seeing very much Aztec mythology represented in American pop culture, but again, specifically American comics. Once in a while, they'd have an Aztec god in like a Thor comic, or Dr. Fate took on Tezcatlipoca one issue. But so all I knew was I wanted to do something Day of the Dead and Aztec mythology. They're kind of separate items, right? Because Aztec mythology is historically from Mexico. Day of the Dead is more modern, influenced by a lot of different things, Catholic culture and such. So I just had to figure out, how do I put these two together? So I just thought of that's easy. There's this young man on Diego de la Muerte on his 21st birthday. He gets killed in a car accident. He wakes up in the Aztec land of the dead, confronted by these Aztec gods. They rip his heart out, send him back to Earth a year later. And then he was going to a Day of the Dead festival on November 2nd when he got killed, because that's his birthday. I mean, what coincidence, right? A guy called Diego de la Muerte is born on Day of the Dead. He's back a year later without a heart, supposedly to be an avatar for these gods, but he rebels against it. So, I mean, really, it's almost, I don't want to say it was that easy, but I just forced those two ideas together, and that's what I came up with.
I love it though, because I think this is true of like superhero comics. It's like a lot of the great superhero comics, even like, I know you're a Ditko fan too. And it's like, if you think of like the origins of like Spider-Man, they're not like these intensely like deep things. Like the depth comes from the storytelling outside of a plot that is not like crazy deep. So like, I think you hit on gold there. Like, because I think honestly, like a lot of the time as artists, we're like struggling to find the thing that feels like, wait a minute, that's like, somebody has to have done this. Cause because it's so like there, like just clear as day, like that, like what you just described, like that plot is very solid, very consistent, and it like I just imagine if I came up with something like that, I'd be like, this has to have been done, and then I research and be like, it hasn't been done. I have to do this, like. Right. So to me, I think that's really cool. By the way, our guest last week was Comics with Chris, and he's checking this out.
Oh, cool! I'm going to check out his.
He's Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Josh. I mean, and going back to what you said, like this thing hasn't been done. Because I think Chris, when we were talking about bringing Hav on, Chris might have been a little concerned that there was a similar, that he was working on something similar. But I also want to let people know that there's room enough for everything, and everyone's going to tell their story differently. And they're like you said, there's Coco, there's Book of Life. I mean, there's other interpretations and stories based around the Day of the Dead, but everyone's going to be different. So and the more the merrier, really.
Yeah, we mentioned that too on there because it's like, Marvel's Thor is a lot different than like the Norse like myth of Thor. And then if you read like, Neil Gaiman, like digging deep into like that stuff and retelling it like as it was, but like in a much more interesting way than a lot of the myths read, you start seeing like the variations in these stories. We're all kind of working with a similar toolkit, and so I think yeah, for sure.
Well, Josh, I'm so glad you mentioned something when I told you the origin. You go because it sounded like you're kind of saying, hey, those old Marvel comics, they were just done like the guy thought of it probably at the water cooler, like really quick, radioactive spider, and that's what I tried to do actually when I was coming up with I was just thinking of the old days they just came up with a quick premise. Now let me get started. And even my research on Aztec mythology, because I get asked a lot. And then I see today there's like such a way wider, so many more artists, young artists, whatever age, doing, like I said, Aztec myths, Mayan myths. And I see so many of these things, and they're so well researched. Like, okay, these people are going really, really deep, and that's great. From the beginning, I told myself, because I'm a lazy researcher, like, okay, I'm done with school, so we're not going to do crazy research anymore. I just did surface research because these are my Aztec gods. Like, the god of death, my version. Tezcatlipoca, god of destiny, that's my version of it. I'll let others do like much more detailed, and they really want to respect and honor what came before, and that's no problem with that. But I took the Kirby approach, like you were saying. Look at Kirby's Thor stories.
Yes.
Wow, they're probably 10% Norse mythology and 90% crazy Kirby space god gonzo epic. And I want that 90% of my work, and then the 10%, maybe 20 or 30, touching on the old stuff, the classic, ideas. So I'm glad you underlined that.
Yeah, and I think that's actually one of the, like, I really will encourage like people go to let me pull that up again, but go here, right? Pick up El Muerto if you want to at least get introduced to Hav's work. He's working on a ton of other stuff, but that's a really, Days of the Dead is a really good starting point. It's going to be a lot of graphic novels coming out shortly too for that, so at least you can get on board like early on. But I will say, like, that's one of the things I really like about your approach is like the sort of Kirby approach, and like the stylization with the inks, like the fun with the plot, and the fact that I think, like, to me, like, the thing that's cool about the way you write is like you dig into the emotion, and that the plot sort of serves the emotion that's outside of the plot and furthers the plot. And I think that's a very like Kirby-esque thing, which is really cool. So, yeah. Well,
I got to say thanks for that word emotion, because I've been told by other people over the years. It's one of my favorite things to hear. One of my friends says, I like your comics because even though you do these wild, gonzo, crazy monster characters and whatever, like no matter how crazy they become, like you always keep their core humanity.
Yes.
And I'm not tooting my own horn, but it's like that's what I try to, when I'm drawing the comic. It's like when I'm sitting on my table drawing, I'm not so much like okay, every line's got to be straight. I got to get the 90-degree angle perfect and all that. I want that right, but I'm like it's almost like I'm like trying to will my emotional state or what I think the character should feel onto the paper. So if that comes through in the reader by some weird alchemy or something, good, because I'm hoping for that. So
I love that. Jim was asking, what are some of the elements you take from Bronze Age comics that you apply to your storytelling? And then he said, pretending I don't know.
God, that ending is beautiful. Yeah, the Bronze Age comics. So people know it's like the comics, say Marvel comics that started coming out throughout the later, early 70s onward to probably mid 80s, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I take from there, again, I thought those comics it was another group of writers, like Stan Lee had pretty much quit writing, but so now you got all these young comic fans like Marv Wolfman, Len Wein, Jerry Conway, young guys, college guys, maybe hippies, whatever. I mean, really, so they're bringing another aesthetic to the comic, the superheroes and everything. A lot of their stuff was, I think they're more tortured, like they were like a lot of them were monster characters like Morbius and Man-Thing, and a lot of them seem very tortured. And that's what I really wanted to answer Jim's question. I've always liked those type of tortured, haunted heroes.
Yeah.
You can perfectly see that in the Incredible Hulk TV show, David Banner. Every episode ends so tragic and he's got to get up and leave again. And then he starts somewhere else in another town and he's trying to find a cure, and he has to get some really menial job and stay undercover, and he can't help but get involved with somebody. He has to help them instead of keeping undercover. He helps somebody. He gets exposed as the Hulk, and he's got to go. And it's like, as a little kid, like I actually like that show, even though I love the comic. Surprisingly, I wasn't like, oh, it's not like the comic. They don't have all the big monsters. I go, something in my little 10-year-old brain, like, wow, this emotional stuff is pretty neat.
Yeah. I think that's why I always connected with Marvel, like in the whole Marvel versus DC thing, which I think is starting to fade a little bit. But the era that I got into comics, there was like definitely a divide, and I was like a Marvel guy because like I think Spider-Man was like the character that I connected with the most, and the reason was because of that, like that inevitable, like he was this sort of guy who like. He wasn't actually a superhero. So when he put on a costume, he was kind of pretending and then just kind of getting away with it and having fun with it. But like at his core, he was like a really insecure guy with like a lot of struggles. Mm-hmm. And I think especially, the age that I connected, I think I might be like the last generation that like similar to you guys, like my first comics were like bought on a spinner rack at like an AM PM or actually a 7-Eleven at the time.
Yep.
But it's like, and then I think I like moved up to like a Read More books, which doesn't exist anymore. But at the time they had spinner racks and it was like, oh, cool. There's like, I can find like some of the issues, and then you discover a comic store like it's, the next best thing. But anyhow, like, I do think that depth of character and that conflict that Marvel brought in to comics, like, was a little more interesting to me than like the kind of God figures where they're just like sort of perfect. And it's like their struggle is like more epic and iconic. To me, I do love that about a character, is a character that's like sort of struggling with like a complicated identity. And I think that's one of the great things about El Muerto as well.
By credit to Marvel Comics, like that 60s, 70s era, they really did define that tortured hero thing. And I think that's what so many of us responded to. And I'm pretty sure that's pretty much what primed me and a lot of people as we moved into our 80s. Oh, the Smiths and Morrissey and all that's, the
dude, 100%. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Smiths, because it's like anybody who kind of relates to that. If you don't like the Smiths, I don't trust you. So Frank was asking a serious question for Hav. Which show do you prefer, Chess Burrito or Capulina? I don't know what either of those are.
Well, I'm glad it's a serious question. Well, I'll tell you what.
Frank goofs around, by the way.
Frank Kaufman. Frank, do us a favor. You write on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram which one you think I'm more of a fan of, and then I'll pick if it works, I'll send you a prize. I'll message you and I'll send you some buttons or something.
I love it. So Frank, this is like now a game show kind of setup. So post on social media which you think Hav prefers, and then he will potentially give you some free swag. So
yeah, I'll send him something. I got buttons, stickers.
Nicely.
That's a good one.
Nicely done. All right. So El Muerto, you spent 3 years. I relate to that so much, and I remember I met you like early 2000s at Wizard World. Like this is like
LA.
Probably about 20 years ago at this point. Maybe a little less than 20, but at least 18 years ago. And I had just put out Numb, like my little floppy comic.
Yep,
and you gave me so much good advice about like confidence about presentation at a convention. And this is still like an era where because you and I also were very active on podcasts, like before podcasting was like a big thing. And so I think we might have actually been like, strangely enough, like some of the earliest like art podcasts around. It's kind of a bummer that, because we were all doing it through TalkShoe at the time. And it's a bummer, like they got rid of like their cache, like their backlog.
You know.
And it's kind of a bummer because it's like we were kind of there at like the inception. We just used the wrong platform. But I do remember still like you gave some really good advice. And I also remember mentioning that my first, it was like a 24-page floppy. And I just at that point had kind of felt like a complete failure as a cartoonist. And I remember you kind of being like, no, you don't understand. Like these things take a lot of time, like at first, and you'll kind of get, you're kind of learning. And so like just the fact that you got that first floppy out, that's a good thing. And you were like super encouraging. And it was very, very cool at that time. So I caught you at a good convention moment, I guess.
Yeah, no, exactly. Because I probably made $50 that day or something. $20. I'm super happy.
But yeah, like it was really encouraging for me because I do relate to like what you're talking about. This whole process of like it took like 3 years to do a 30-page comic. Like the first comic you do, and this is for anybody who's like dipping into this. Like seriously try to attack, like because we can all do like a quick doodle and make a mini comic like that's possible for everybody. But the second you start taking it seriously and you're like, I really want to make like a floppy that like is good,
right?
It's shocking the amount of time. Like I still to this day vividly remember just being like very judgmental of comics until I tried to do comics. And then I was like, my judgment went way down because I was like, this is a crap load of work. Like, it doesn't matter how good you get at drawing, how good you get at designing. The first comic you do will rock your world and will take twice as long, at least, of what you expect, Yeah.
I was just talking to someone today. We're talking about something like about comics, how much time. And I remember years ago when I started doing the comics, and maybe I went to a gallery show or something. There's different artists there that had paintings on the wall. They were painters, and I was admiring one. And this guy's like, "What do you do?" "I do comic books. Check it out." "Oh, wow." He's like, "Wow, he's like, man." As I'm admiring his painting, right? He's like, "Man, I wish I could do a comic." And my first thought was, well, you can paint like a badass. But he's like, yeah, telling the story with those panels and boxes, I can't do that and make it. I go, well, you can tell a one panel comic with your painting, but yeah. So the grass is always greener, and I got to, and it made me think, yeah, you know what, maybe I wish I could paint as good as he does, but you know what, I can. I think I got this comic skills, I guess, and I'm gonna stick with it, and I have. So it's interesting, like different artists' perspective on. I wish I could do that. I wish I could do what you do.
Oh, dude, 100%. And one thing that's really fascinating that I think connects a lot of artists is, and you'll notice, like, I'm sure you've noticed this, Hav, too, but it's like the longer I've been at it, the more I'll like meet guys who like directed films for like Disney and stuff. And you just think like, oh, well, they're at like the apex, like
Right.
they must be happy. And they're like, okay, tell me about like your personal projects. Cause like I have this idea for a graphic novel and you're like, wait, what? Like you? Like it's a weird thing where the longer you're kind of in this industry, like the more you kind of realize like a lot of people actually like really want to do these like self-created stories. And so in a weird way, we're kind of fortunate to be able to be putting those out because a lot of people like spend their careers like working for the time to make the stuff that we've made. And so I do think that's really cool.
They want to do what we do. Sit up at night working on our comic, not having to take all these idiotic studio notes, test marketing, audience notes, you know, oh, the budget's been cut by $1 million. You got to cut off this, you know. They want to do what we do. Just look, everybody wants to go up and be Scott. Look at Scott. He's working. He's listening. He's talking. He's engaging, but he's not answering to, you know, focus groups and all this other stuff. So, I mean, yeah, I like maybe one of us would like to make a film. It'd be cool to have a $20 million budget and have a bunch of people help me make a film. But comics is beautiful. It's what we do. It's our vocation, man.
I'm glad you brought up film. So let's get into El Muerto, how it became a film. And then I do want to, I mean, that's an awesome story. It's so epic. But I also really want to get into the thinking behind kind of setting up the Latino Comics Expo, which, you know, like has helped a lot of friends of mine in comics, like actually like have a platform to kind of like launch their stuff. I'm kind of excited to talk about that too. So
yeah, well, it's chronological because the film came out in 2007 and the expo after. So yeah, the film. So I started in '98 doing some MUERTO comics and such, and pretty early on, I think it's 2001, I got a letter in my PO box. Does anybody still have PO boxes? So at the post office, you can rent a little. I've had it for 23 years, so
it's the way to go. It helps you not have strange people show up at your house.
Send me the letters, whatever, and I'll get it, and yeah, we'll talk. Yeah, I got a letter from this little production office. This guy Tyler was like, "Oh, we heard about what happened was I did an interview at San Diego Comic-Con in 2001. This guy was ahead of his time. I forgot his name. I forgot what show. It was a PBS show. I forgot what show he did, but he wanted to interview Latino comic creators. That's what he went there for this story. So there was some of us out there in the let's say early 2000s. He interviewed me. You know, I sat there, asked questions. He left. And I thought, okay, that was cool. Hopefully it gets aired and somebody hears it. Well, somebody heard it. It was a director, independent film director, Brian Cox, not the actor from X-Men 2. I always say that when I do comic interviews because we're comic fans. Oh, Brian Cox, Stryker. Mm-hmm. He was like excellent. No, this is a writer director. He heard the interview and he was interested. Like, oh, it's interesting. Like you were saying, oh, Day of the Dead, Aztec, El Muerto. Oh, let me get a hold of this. So they wrote me. We'd like to get some copies of your comic. We couldn't find them at Meltdown, which is no longer there. I know. Like,
that breaks my heart to this day. Like that was literally like one of the best. Like,
I was heartbroken. I couldn't go to the last day, like because they had the last final day sale. Like I can't go. It's going to be too hard.
Yeah.
God bless those guys. So anyway, getting off track. So blah blah blah. Yeah, they wanted some comics. So I told them, well, you can just order direct from me. I had no website at the time. It was all done Mickey Mouse style. And then okay, they sent me a check. It was like $15 for 2 comics. I sent them the comics. Months later, they wrote back, hey, we'd like to, our director's interested in meeting you. So can you come down one day here? So it's like, wow, I'm going to go to Sunset Boulevard. Again, another heartbreaker, Josh. His office was across the street from the Tower Records on Sunset.
All my killing me, Javi.
All my stories, because I'm been here so long, everything's gone, disappeared. No, I'm sorry.
Amoeba's still there. Like Amoeba is one of those ones where I hold my hopes at Amoeba. Like the second Amoeba's gone and the Troubadour's gone, I'm like, I'm out.
That Galactus, come and take us, eat us. We're done. Actually, I don't think Amoeba was around in 2001, was it?
I don't think so. I
predated Amoeba. Woo!
Oh, geez, that's crazy.
Anyway, so I went to go meet Brian at his office. I sat down. Hey, how you doing, Javier? And blah. He had a lot of questions. Hey, what are the gods doing? What's the purpose of this? And I was very honest. Maybe I didn't know any better. It's like I go, I'm not sure. I haven't thought that far out, or I haven't got to that point yet. We talked for an hour, and at the end of the hour, he's like, well, look, obviously, I called you here, because I'm interested. I think this will make a good film. This will make a film, potential for a film. Would you be interested? And then I said, I don't know if it's proper English. I go, well, I wouldn't be not interested. He laughed. Long story short, I had to get a lawyer because they were going to make me he got a producer. They started sending me like, hey, let's meet. And I got to tell you, the courtship is nice. They're courting you out there. Hey, we're going to meet at this steakhouse. I don't go to steakhouses, not in Hollywood or even here in Whittier. Well, let's meet at this. Okay, let's meet at the steakhouse and let's meet at the sushi. They're paying. So you get courted, and you get the deal, you get the contract, the lawyer bounce. Next thing you know, you're signing the deal. I remember signing it at the producer's office on Miracle Mile, down by where the museum's at. Is it Wilshire, I think? And he's on the second floor, and he gives me the contract, and I'm signing it. This is after I looked at it with my lawyer. Folks, always make sure the lawyer looked through it first, and it took months and months to negotiate it.
Dude, other tip too, if you guys are coming up in like art school or you're like early cartoonists, befriend a lawyer. Like become friends with a lawyer. It's awesome. They'll send cease and desists for you. They're awesome. They're great friends to have. That's all I'm saying.
It's a good weapon to have in your arsenal, a cease and desist lawyer, yeah.
Oh, dude.
But yeah, we signed it, and then eventually, 2 years later, I'm on the set in San Fernando Mission.
I love it.
We're there in the big, okay, everybody. They make a big circle of the entire production team, first day of filming. And then the assistant director's like, okay, guys, we're doing our first scene today, blah, blah, blah. She's all, oh, by the way, so everybody, let's take a minute. We got to thank someone who, if it wasn't for them sitting there and making this comic, and we wouldn't be here. Javier Hernandez, like, yeah. I'm like, wow. In the whole circle of all these filmmakers.
That's awesome. So surreal. And that's pretty quick. That's a pretty quick amount of time for all that to happen. That must have been like the most surreal experience.
It was one of them. I mean, the whole 4 months of filming was every day was surreal and magical. But yeah, the film was made, independent film starring Wilmer Valderrama, Fez from that 70s show back in 90. This was 2000. We filmed it in 2005, so he was right in the middle, like season 3, season 4. Like he was hot stuff, right? This whole cast, and
yeah,
it was perfect, And so it was a great experience. I mean, I was there every day filming it. Thankfully, I live in LA, so they filmed it here, so I was able to go every day. I got a little associate producer credit. Hung out a lot at the craft service table, but just got to walk around. Well, yeah, of course. Hey, man, let me have some more of that red licorice. But no, hung out on the set. Like, oh my God, I never went to film school. Like, wow, this is film school, but they picked my comic as the project. And I would just go hang out with the sound guys. Hey, have a seat. Talking to the wardrobe people. I had a cameo in the movie. So I remember the day of my cameo, here in my drawer here, I put on my Steve Ditko Spider-Man watch, which I bought at the Robinson's May Company back in. It was a Fossil. Mm-hmm. This collector watch. Like, I'm gonna have a Steve Ditko Spider-Man on me, and then I had my black shirt. And I remember, like, okay, I got 3 hours before my scene. It's like, hey, makeup crew, can I get a haircut? Okay, so I'm sitting there like acting like a movie star, like getting my makeup, the hair, for a cameo, and then they gave me my costume. It was just a black poncho with a skeleton on it, and then I had actually made my own with my friend Steve Guerra. A paper mache skull mask because it's Day of a Dead scene. I still have the mask. And I remember, like, I came out of the trailer. You feel like $1 million. You come out of the trailer with your makeup and your costume, and the people with the walkie-talkie, okay, Javier's ready. And then they send the tram over.
Yeah.
This was filmed at Evergreen Cemetery in East LA.
Oh, sweet.
This is surreal, right? Most of the film, 95%, was filmed outdoors. Only studios
so awesome.
were we're in the land of the dead, inside of a big black studio thing. But I filmed a cameo with Wilmer. I wanted the cameo. I saw the script. I want to play that guy because I come out of the festival with the mask. Wilmer's walking in as El Muerto. He's already transformed. He sees me, and he says, "A nice outfit, man." And then I take the mask off, and I look at him, and I go, "Thanks," because I wanted a scene with the actor as El Muerto.
That's so badass.
Speaking role.
A speaking role on top of that, yeah. I was nerve-wracking that day because I get that evening, they take me to the front gates of the cemetery. I'm like, oh crap, like the neighborhood's out there. The executive producers, for whatever reason, they happen to be in town that day. They're there. The producers there. It's like, oh, don't muck it up, Hav. I am not a real actor. I'm sure you noticed that. I did my scene in 3 takes, and I counted the other actors during the day. Like, oh, Michael Parks did about 3 takes. Tony Plum, these are veterans. Okay, I did mine in 3 takes, so we're all good. And now I'm got my one IMDb screen credit.
Hell yeah!
I made it.
Awesome.
You get your SAG card?
No. People ask me that. I don't know what do you need? Just one? You need more roles than that? Maybe I should go back and get it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'll get a $4.25 month pension when I retire.
I love it. That's so cool though. Like, and I also think it's just kind of like a good example of like sort of Los Angeles too. Like in the sense of like just that sort of moment of like being courted and
it is very LA.
That is so cool.
It's very LA, but like I always tell people, hey man, I'm just a regular guy, working class Mexican neighborhood. You know, the movie was awesome, but I tell people at the time, like, I still go to Target on Sunday morning for the sales, and I'm in the drive-thru at Carl's Jr. and I can't understand the speaker either. What? No, a cheeseburger. So, a regular guy. I tell people I'm just a regular guy, but I do that to inspire people. I didn't have any film experience. No one in my family was in the business. I just made a comic, and I made the comic because I just wanted to make a comic. I didn't make the comic because I wanted a movie. Nothing wrong if you do that, but I just wanted the comic, and I got a movie out of it. So cool. And I went back and kept making comics.
Yeah, and I think it's like a good example of like the power of saying yes, where it's like you just kind of do like the thing you feel compelled to do, and then like it's just a matter of like being there for like opportunities if they arise. So how do you get from El Muerto the film, El Muerto the comic, to sort of like starting the Latino Comics Expo? Because I definitely want to get into that too. And I will say this touches close to home for me because I used to live like right on like Long Beach and 13th.
Yeah.
So it's like I was like literally like a walk away from like acres of books. And then if you went just like made a left and like kept going, you're at like the Latino Art Museum in Los Angeles, in Long Beach. And so it's like, this is like kind of my neck of the woods. Like I know that area. Like I lived there for like 6 years, and I absolutely adored that museum, and always felt like, gosh, if they could like get something going here, like beyond just like the art, exhibits, which are great, but the fact that like it's just a perfect location too. So anyhow, I'm just kind of curious how that came to fruition, like what your thinking was, and like kind of setting that up, and how that came to be.
Man, when you said acres of books, I remember going there in the late '80s.
Oh, it's the best. It's like
bookstores, Anderson bookstore. No, it was in Whittier, but.
Yeah, but I mean, it was like literally like, so it's this weird store where you'd walk by and it looked like a typical used bookstore on the front. Yeah. But then you go in it and it goes back like a block. Yeah. Like, there's like a stage there. Yeah. So like from the front, it was very much like walking into the TARDIS, where you're like, from it's bigger on the inside. But it was like that with like crazy awesome used books. And great stuff. Hours there
in the old days. But the expo actually started up in San Francisco at the Cartoon Art Museum.
I love it.
Yeah, me and my friend Ricardo Padilla, we're the co-founders. I was up there at San Francisco probably for a comic show, whatever, staying with him and his wife and his kids at their place. And when they
maybe
were
like, was it like Ape or something at the time? Or
it probably would have been Ape, Alternative Press Expo.
Yeah.
But it's another show. That's where I debuted El Muerto, '98 at San Jose. But so we're walking the streets there in San Francisco, and we're talking about stuff, and he was like lamenting something that this Mexican museum wasn't going to be happening up there. And he was bummed out because he's a big supporter of the arts and just Mexican Latino artists and such. And I was just like, I felt for him, right? Like, wow, man. And I go, I don't know, I can't do anything about that. But I go, I don't know, maybe we can. And I literally made up the word on the street there. Maybe we can just, I know a ton of artists at this point. It's 2000, was it 2011, I think. So I've been publishing for, I don't know, all the dates get mixed up. Some years. I go, I know a lot of cartoonists. I go, maybe we can put together a Latino Comics Expo. He's like, what's that? I go, well, I guess it'd be like a little convention where we just gather up a couple of Latino creators, comic creators, and put on a show. So I told him, I go, look, why don't you try Cartoon Art Museum just for the hell of it, right? We're two guys off the street. Hey, let's do an expo. Ask them first. They're probably going to say no, understandably, because who are we? And then go look for your local American Legion or whatever you got in San Francisco that's super cheap. Some dingy hall, we'll take that. I go home. Weeks later, he calls me. Hey, Hob, they said yes. And I'm like, I'm like,
it's amazing.
Well, I'm like, who said yes? I forgot about it. Who said yes? Cartoon Art Museum. They want to do the expo. I'm like, oh crap, we got to put together an expo. All right. It's like I'm in the convention business, kids. Things happen. Sometimes they happen so easy without you even trying to go after it. It's crazy. The universe just catches up to you somehow.
That's amazing. And I think that's also like a good sign of just like the power of just kind of being there, being present, and just saying yes. Because you're like, okay, there's a thing that should exist. We're just kind of throw that idea out there. And if something happens, I'll say yes, which I think is really cool.
We had about 12 artists. So, they said yes. And we talked to them. Hey, when can we do it? And we'll do it this date. Okay. So then it's like, well, let me contact 12 artists. Well, really small show, 12 artists, real cute, little intimate. We spread out into 3 different little galleries, and that was the first one. This year will be our 10th anniversary.
That's amazing.
And another thing we're happy with is we were the first one. As far as I can go back, people look it up on Google for me because I look it up and I don't see. We're the first Latino comic centered convention in this country, and today there's about 5 or 6 or 7. And I know most of the people who found it. It's like it's grown because hey, you show people, people do want to gather for a weekend and focus on Latino comic creators, graphic novelists, whatever you want to categorize it. And it's been a wonderful, we've had the Hernandez brothers there, separate and all together. Mario lived up in San Francisco. So we did the first 3 at the Cartoon Art Museum, and then we went to San Jose, San Jose State, Martin Luther King Museum. And then we came down to your beloved Museum of Latin American Art in Long Beach for some 4, maybe 3, 4, 5 shows at this point. And we've been to Brownsville, Texas. We got invited to go there. So it's a traveling show, but kind of, I think we've done the most shows at Mola in Long Beach. And we actually have a meeting with them this Thursday this week. No, I mean, what's today? Next week, I guess. So I'll let anybody know because everybody's going to ask, hey, what's going on? Last year, like everybody else, we did an online show. So we have to find out what your situation is in Long Beach, what's going on.
Yeah.
In a few months. So we'll let everybody know. But we'll do another show, whether it's, online, maybe a hybrid show. Depends on the circumstances. Obviously, if it was up to me, we'd always do a live show. But, you got to be realistic with the situation you're in.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's been crazy for any organizers, but so what's crazy is like to do 10, like having known a few people who've like organized events, like that is no small task. And then also the fact that it started with, what were you saying, 15?
12.
16,
I think it was
12. So the fact that it started with 12 and it's kind of grown to like branch out to conventions that are beyond that convention. I think just speaks to like an industry that wasn't serving its constituents. And like, I think that's just so inspiring that like that you would put in the work for 12 initially, because that's a crap load of work to organize an event like that.
Exactly. We love our artist friends, but man, it's like herding cats.
Yeah. I mean, anyone who wants like a taste of it, just try to get like an anthology put together, and that'll give you like a tenth of what it's like to organize an event like that. You know, that's crazy.
Sometimes those are worse or harder, I should say.
That's true. That's true. Anthologies are a beast.
It's crazy.
But I think that's amazing that you've sustained that for 10 years and that you've seen growth. And I think it's cool that you and your friend like saw a need in the industry and just kind of filled it. You know, I think that's amazing.
It goes back to my first impulse for making the El Muerto comic. Like, I want to see more fill in the blank. In my case, you know, Mexican American content out there. So the convention, we want to see Latino creators. I mean, you know, the Latino creators go to every show. They're at Wizard World. They're everywhere. I tell people, no, keep going. You know, creators keep going to those shows. What I looked at it like is kind of crass. It's like it was for the audience. Oh, this is a one-stop shopping center because the audience can't go to all those shows. But if they go to this show for the weekend, oh wow, here's 12 artists, here's 20. At Mola, we end up getting 80 tables. They double up. 100 might be 120 artists. So the public gets to walk in the doors and visit 80, 90, 100 plus different artists doing every type of comic, graphic novel, political comics, historical comics, zines. Sometimes we just have people who do illustration, paintings. We've had filmmakers. We've had a Mexican wrestler who's doing his own comic. So yeah, it gives us such pleasure to be able to present that to people. And then I love hearing from the other artists, especially women, like, wow, these little girls come to my table and they're just staring at me because they probably think, oh, I didn't know girls can come. You know what I mean? That's so. And then think about those little girls one day. Some of them may want to make comics themselves later, or, you know. So it's been a great, as organizers, it's such a privilege and a pleasure to do this.
Dude, that's amazing, and it's important because you know, I think it's. I personally believe that like the more kind of diversity and representation we have in comics, the better we are, like as a field, just like books or movies or anything. It's like I feel like comics occasionally will like niche down and forget that we're like an entertainment media, and like in an ideal world, at some point you're going to walk into a comic shop and you're going to see every genre. Like, you know, you might even have to have it broken down by section where it's like, hey, you got fiction, you got nonfiction, you got like literary, you got, you know, Western, like you got like all the genres and all the representation. Like, I think the closer we can kind of get to that, like just as a consumer of it, much less a creator of it, I think it's better.
So Japanese fans have had it great for years. They go, oh, I want fishing comics. Here's the fishing, not a superhero in style. I want a cooking comic. I want a sushi comic. Like, dude, my God, so true. Like we were literally talking about this on a show, I think like a couple weeks ago, but it's like, I do think that's one of the advantages that like manga kind of is clued into. I think European comics are a lot more clued into. And yet in the US, we're like stuck in like this myopic, like one genre, like undiverse, like creator kind of mode. And we're seeing that shatter. And I think it's good, but it's like, it's just such a slow slog to get that train moving forward, you know, where it's like, hey, it's a good thing. Like to me, I think it's really cool. Like one thing I've been enjoying just as a dad is like, you know, and this never happened when I was a kid. But right now, I can literally like order from Scholastic comics for my kid by like Dave Pilkey and Raina Telgemeier. And like, I mean, that is huge. Like just the fact that that exists. And it's not like a Sunday comic. It's not, you know, it's not I just think that's
like those strides are incredible, and I feel like it's really cool that you were a part of like one of the big strides forward in comics that personally I feel like if they write like a history of comics, especially conventions, you know, you're going to be in there. Like it's there's no way that's not like an important movement, you know. And I think that's just it's cool to see you doing that. And
to me, it starts though from like you were asking me earlier, like the artist. If there's enough artists that want, like in my case, Latino creators, whatever you want to call them, Mexican American, Latinx, Chicano, whatever. If there's enough of them, then great, we can gather them and put them in a show. You know.
Oh yeah.
To me, it's organic that way. Like, well, there's all these people doing this anyway. Let's put them together for the weekend and let the audience, you know. In one of those early shows at the Cartoon Art Museum, there was this little girl there, and then her grandpa was kind of behind her. And he came up to me and Ricardo, and he was an old, you know, San Francisco, but he reminded me like an LA old school Chicano guy. And he goes, yeah, I came yesterday and I came back today with my granddaughter because I didn't know there was, you know, Latino comics. I didn't know like Latinos were making comics. Thank you, sir. That's why we're doing this. And thank you for bringing your granddaughter back. And he said something that was so, man, he's such a beautiful guy. He's an older guy. And he was telling me like, wow, you know, I don't know anything about baseball, but he was telling me, you know, back in the old days, there was this Mexicano from some team playing baseball. And, you know, and I thought, oh, this guy's going to make it. We're going to have a Mexican. This is probably before Valenzuela, you know, this is probably 40s or 50s. And then he said the guy disappeared. Like, oh, he never made it. And he's like, I don't want that to happen to you guys, man. And his voice was getting a little choked up. And now I'm getting all like, you know, I don't want that to happen to you guys. And we're like, no, sir, that we don't want that to happen to these artists either. That's why we're doing this show. And that's why it's important. You, people like you come here and support, you bring your children, your grandchildren.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that man, he's like I think he's our invisible patron saint, wherever he's at, you know?
I love it though, because like the thing that I do want to address Frank's question too.
Yes.
He was asking if you guys have been to McAllen, Texas, and any plans to come down there.
Well, I forgot the geography, but we were in Brownsville, Texas, just a couple years ago, Frank. Yeah, I mean, there's not a plan to go back there again, but you know, we'd be happy if someone institution in McAllen, like, you know, art museum, whatever, reached out to us. We're always interested in traveling our show.
Frank, pull some strings, man. Like talk to some locals, see if you can get that set up.
Thanks, Frank.
Yeah, I just think that's so inspiring, and you know, I remember this dawning on me like when I was like in junior high, I was really obsessed with comics, and I had two older sisters, and I kept like loaning them comics, trying to get them into comics. And they'd just be like, I don't know, it just doesn't speak to me. Like every comic. Fast forward to today, and my sisters frequent comic shops more than I do. As like consumers. Yeah. And like I think that's cool that like there was a thing that wasn't speaking to women at that era that's happening now that wasn't happening then, that allows them kind of to get in that access point. And it like, to me, anything that kind of furthers that, like we need to encourage, because we're way too small. Like comics are way too small, especially indie comics, that to kind of divide. Like I think like we need to expand, we need to include, and honestly, I just think steps like that to allow like that man to kind of see a vision of like what comics can be, what they can represent, like who is working in comics, is just it's beautiful and it's cool. Sorry.
Well, the only way, like you're saying, your sisters, that's so bizarre that they're going to a shop more than you do now, a comic shop, because they're finding the stuff they want.
Right.
That's just a testament to finally we're a real art form.
Yes.
I love the old superhero comics. Don't get me wrong. But we're not going to be an art form if all we can show people is, hey, check out these cool back issues of Werewolf by Night that I love, and Morbius the Vampire. That's not an art form, but an art form is when you have stuff of, you know, I grew up in Iran and my family brought me over here, or, you know, all the other authors you mentioned, and just all these different experiences, you know, drama, personal stories, whatever it is.
I absolutely adore it. And I will say, I think we're getting, I always love calling out like the spam kind of haters, but there's somebody called Avenging Pineapple saying, I've never heard such nonsense in my life. I think you don't know what you're talking about. Thank you, Avenging Pineapple. I have a strange feeling that that's probably just like some kind of spam hate thing. So
yeah, they're right. It shouldn't be anybody other than white people making comments.
But that's the kind of crap that I think is amazing that's been fought and overcome by things like the expo that you set up, Hav, and honestly, just the work you've been doing in comics too. So, all right, Hav, let's get into now. Like what are you working on now? What are the projects you're excited about? I know we've definitely glossed over a lot of like the bigger projects that you've done outside of like El Muerto as well. Like you've done some pretty extensive research on like Steve Ditko. You've done some pretty awesome like political parody comics.
Oh my God, Demolition Dove! Wow.
Yes, I remember that era, man. So what do you what are you currently working on? What's kind of keeping you inspired on comics? What's your big goal? Like what's the carrot you're chasing now that keeps you in this game?
The long-term goal, like the big golden, magic carrot, that's the big super goal, is, and it's not in my hands, but I'll do what I can on the earthly plane. But I hope to leave behind a 10-volume, 1,000+ page comic book El Muerto epic. So that's the big broad strokes. So I'm currently on hey, look, Scott, I got pages here. I'm not working on them today, but
yours are you're spotting a lot better blacks than mine. Mine are pretty sparse so far, but
well, this is a horror comic and it's got to be black and dark and like John Romita calls them juicy blacks. I love how he describes them.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm working on the hand drawn. It's all hand drawn. I got several pencil pages I get to ink later. So I like to get I like to get maybe 3 or 5 pencil pages at a clip, and then now I'll just spend some time inking them, and then do another 5 pencil pages. And so working on graphic novel number 2, which I did my first Kickstarter last year. I did a preview comic for the second graphic novel, so it's the first 26 pages were done. I go, well, you know what? Let me letter them, and then let me make a preview comic for those who can't wait. And luckily, and then also this had a special. I had the thumbnails in the back of the book. Well, people like us are all into those nerdy process, funky stuff. My rough thumbnails, and then of course in the front of the book was the. I did that, and working on the graphic novel. Shooting to get that out this year, and I'm working on. So Steve Ditko, one of my spirit animals, shining stars, biggest influences. I did a little a zine about him back in 2017. You don't know Ditko, so it's a little because I figured with the rise of Doctor Strange and people are going to hear this guy's name. Regardless on CNN or whatever, just hearing the movies, like just by, they'll hear Stan Lee, but they're gonna hear Steve Ditko. Well, this is who he is. So I just do a primer on his career, what he's meant to me, what he's done. And
that is so cool. And I think I will say too, it's also coming from a place of authenticity. Like Hav's probably the biggest Steve Ditko fan I know. To the point of like writing letters to him when he was doing his own self-published work, and just kind of getting to me, I think that's a book worth owning for people.
So this summer in his hometown, so he passed away in 2018, age 90, in Johnstown, Pennsylvania, his hometown, his family's involved with it. They're doing a 2-month hometown hero Steve Ditko exhibit, July 15th.
Oh, wow.
So I guess it's it's called the Bottle Works. I guess it's like an art district. So the museum there is going to have a big Ditko show. The family is saying, they said it online, there's going to be stuff in there that no one's seen outside the family. It's like, damn.
Oof, wow.
Yeah, maybe childhood stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know, but childhood drawings, private drawings he's done. So that's a 2-month exhibit. There's stuff every weekend. I'm going to go to this is public. The first time I'm saying this, I think. I'm going to there. They're having a Ditko con September 11th, the last day of the show, a mini con. So I'll be going there. I'm going to have a new edition of You Don't Know Ditko. It's going to be this is like zine size. It's going to be probably comic book size. It's probably going to be over twice as big. It's going to be like hopefully 50, 60 pages. I got some, new content, some interviews I'm doing with some Ditko universe people, people associated with them or other fans and such. So that's probably gonna be my first big, like, going out, especially traveling, post-con. I'm all vaccinated. I figure September 11th is far enough. Hopefully all the numbers are just better and down. So I'll be traveling to way across the country to Johnstown, Ditko's hometown, selling my Ditko zine and meeting other Ditko fans and probably
I love it.
Work too. So
yeah, it sounds like with that. It sounds like you're gonna clean up with that. At that.
Well, thanks. I'm just excited to like I said, this get out of jail free card right after a year and a half of locked up and not traveling and like this. I go, if I'm gonna go out, let's go all out, baby. Off the country and do it.
Yeah, dude. I feel a similar way because I like released a book at the beginning of the pandemic, and I was like, this is great. How do I promote it? So like now, like I'm like second vaccine. It's been like 2 weeks, so I'm like. I'm literally just like showing up to comic shops like, hey, do you need to pick up some issues? Like anything like that? You want to set up a signing? And I think I'm kind of jumping the gun because like in Los Angeles, like not everything's ready to open, but I'm just like, I'm ready to open. Like I am protected. I'm good. Like, come on, let's get this going. So I'm really excited to hear about like kind of conventions and things coming down the road. So beyond the Steve Ditko and expanding that, you're going to be working on how many volumes of El Muerto do you have like planned?
Yeah, so I got it into me when I did this. So I did the first original El Muerto comics from the beginning, and then I trailed off. I was working on this 2-part storyline in 2008. I put out the first issue. And then before I did the second issue, I started coming out with a bunch of other characters. I did this character called the Man Swamp. And I did another comic called The Coma. And then I did another, I did a Manga Muerto spinoff. And it's like, oh, crap, I got to get back and do part 2 of that. Dead and Confused. So I drew that second part. And I was going to collect the older issues in the trade paperback. But, here's the artist in you. Like, that book from 98 and the one from 2002, like the art is just not there. It just won't look good as a reading experience for a fan.
Yeah.
Bad rough art, little better. Now is modern style. You can say it's vanity, which it is, but I didn't want the reader to be distracted. So I go, I got to redraw that first issue segment and the second issue and then the previous part 1. So, and then I put them together. So in 2017, this came out, Days of the Dead. So it's, at the time it was all new art. Although there is a secret, there's a couple of pages somewhere in here which are from 2008 because I looked at them. I go, you know what? For some reason in 2008, I drew really good where it's holding up to the 2016-17 style. Plus, I like the idea of sticking something old in there to see if anybody ever notices it. So I'm working on book 2, and the way I mapped out the really rough guide, it's like, well, I'm going to need 10 books to tell this whole damn story.
I love that.
Yeah, thanks. I hope I love it when I'm in my 70s finishing it, but I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I think like the thing that's neat about comics, and I want to hear your thoughts on this too, but it's like, I think there's something strange that kind of keeps us all hooked on the whole medium. And it's beyond just like loving reading them, Oh,
yeah.
So what is it that kind of keeps you invested this many years in to where you're like 20 comics? I'm going to do 20 graphic novels or 10 graphic novels. Like, how do you, what is it that keeps you hooked?
There's a lot of things. It's just having that one reader. I mean, obviously you got tons of readers, but it's that one. It's you make the book. It's the book, then it's that one person reading the book. And it's the fact that you can connect them, that they, and just like me as a reader, the way they latch onto the book and the characters, because, and I do it too with books, but like, these aren't real characters. It's just, it's a white sheet of paper, right? It's a white sheet of paper, and it has a bunch of black lines on it, right? The black line, just straight lines, curved lines, splotches of black, and then there's a bunch of letters in these balloon things. It's not a real person. Why do people connect to it? Again, why do I connect to my books that I love and that you love and novels? And it's because they get lost in story. And then it's like I'm not saying addiction, because people have real addiction, so I don't want to make light of it. But I get thrilled, like, wow, I can do another one of these books, and then get that response from people. I'm not even saying like, oh, I'm being famous, I'm getting rich. Hopefully that comes secondary, but just connecting people to a story and your characters. And I'll be honest, a friend of mine, Dr. Teresa Rojas, up at Modesto College in Central California, Northern California, she's been teaching my book in her English composition and sometimes Chicano lit classes. And what she does, I used to go visit back in the old days, but the last couple of semesters I just zoom in, and it's like a book club in a way. It's like, because the book is, they have to legitimately read it. Now, the fact that books are getting read in college courses, that's a whole nother episode. Like, hey, we made it, guys.
Dude, that is 100% true, because that's a new one too.
No, seriously. No, like, the movies are great. It's great that they make movies and cartoons and stuff and video games, but that's all fluffy stuff. I mean, let's be honest, the movies, that's like popcorn stuff. Like, no, now they're being read. And anyway, so I get to talk to these kids, students. My character happens to be 21. This college, that's their age group. So I come in there and I talk, and they have questions. Hey, guys, ask questions, because I know you got to write an essay. And then again, like, oh, is he ever going to get back with his girlfriend, Maria? Hey, what happened to the little blind girl? Again, like, they're not real, but they are real characters. And it's such, for me, lately, always hearing that, like, wow, I couldn't, I'm blessed to have that type of, I don't want to say focus group, it sounds so crass, but, to get that type of feedback from people, because you probably get an email from people, oh, I like your book, it was cool. Okay. Did you like the story? So it's just great to hear that.
Yeah.
And that partly inspires me. I get inspired by just other comic creators. I mean, I have like the Steve Ditko Spider-Man Omnibus, 20 pounds. It's like, it's 1,000+ pages. I just like the idea of 1,000+. So like Stan Sakai, how many 1,000 pages has he done of Usagi Yojimbo? All these great mangaka artists.
And I hear he just signed a deal, I think, with Netflix, which is good. I mean, good for him. Like,
good for him.
Yeah, get that money.
Yeah, he invested all his life in that.
Dude, yeah, 100%.
So, I want to have my 1,000-page epic. I want to keep telling stories. I want to take the idea of taking maybe someone who's 18 years old, they read their first book, and then maybe by the time they're 40, and they read the last book. Like, I mean, I don't know. I can imagine talking to that person when they've read all 10 books over their lifetime, like Harry Potter fans, right? Like, I'm sure I read all when I was a kid, and he got me through this. So that's all exciting. But I really want to tell his story, and I just want to draw it. I want to, entice people with the art and the story and the characters and, all that stuff.
I absolutely love it. I think what you do is really inspiring and cool, and I think that's like one of the better reasons to make comics. For me, it's funny you mentioned like people with real addictions, because I always feel like comics are sort of this strange medium where I actually think most of us who do it are kind of addicted to it. But I think the thing that is addicting is the fact that like we can tell stories in such a unique way where it's not quite like prose. It's not like film. It's just like its own unique medium that I think still has that really intimate personal connection of like a novel, but you still have a little more control over the imagination and the timing of the story. But it's like, it's in that realm where it's not being spelled out for the person. So there's still that connection. But I just think that's amazing and cool. And Yeah, I had the first experience of what you described, where Diana Schutz teaches like an auto-bio comics course at PCU in Portland.
Wow.
And was like, hey, can I teach like a 2 stories, book 1? Like, is that cool? Like, will your publisher be okay with it? And I was like, I don't give a shit if my publisher's okay with it. Yes,
my book. Do it.
Because I'm like, I just think that's so cool that like there's some kid who's gonna learn auto-bio comics, and I get to be like a little tiny piece of that. Like,
yeah, exactly.
What a weird era.
A lot of time the students in these classes, and I always ask them, it's their first time ever reading. I go, why did you take the class? I go, I never read a comic, and I thought this was neat that, I'm doing a literature course and it's a comic. So you're their first comic so many times in these college courses, believe me.
Dude, and to be someone's first comic, like, holy crap, that is huge.
I know.
Huge.
I know.
I will say, like, our weird kind of white supremacist guy who joined on Twitch disappeared very quickly because I responded to him. Like, that's one thing I've noticed on the internet is, like, generally, like, people, that's why I kind of mention them when we're doing shows too, because it's like I've noticed like a lot of these like trolls are really like cowards. So to me, I love calling that out, because once again, freaking cowards beware. They're like, that's not going to prevent awesome cartoonists from putting out their work. So anyhow, I was pleased to see that person disappear very quickly after we responded. Goodbye. If you can't counter an argument, that's the way it goes. Hav, I just really appreciate you sharing like your experience and sharing like what you're working on and sharing a little bit of your history and all of that. I don't know, Scott, are there any questions? Because I feel like I've talked and been guiding this the whole way. Or is there anything you kind of wanted to ask Hav about or anything like that before we kind of start closing?
Oh, this has just been super cool for me, just because I'm just almost just listening as a fan, and just these stories, because I've heard, I know we've had you on before, and we probably touched on the, how that film came to be and everything, but I don't know that you went into it in depth, and I didn't know that whole story. So it was really cool to hear that. And just how you start in the Latin Comic Expo and everything. So yeah, it's kind of just a little crash course in your history and everything. And I'm just kind of also anxious to see, I want to see that, 1,000-page epic, or, I want to, it just,
Right.
I'm just super, super excited about that and where everything's going, because it really is that cool. And just, it's sort of, I had a little taste of the I had a children's show that I created that got optioned, but it never, we shot a pilot, but it was never like out there, kind of like what happened to you. But a lot of that was kind of brought me back, and that was kind of cool. So, but it's just really cool that I like, and I just want everyone to know or reiterate that, you just put the stuff out there, and who knows what'll happen with it. But nothing's going to happen if you don't put your work out there. So
yeah,
definitely put your work out there. And just, who knows what's going to happen. I mean, it's kind of like there's definitely luck involved, but the more places that you're out there, the better chances you have to get lucky, so you got to keep, putting stuff out there, and you're just an excellent example of that, because you've just done so much. So yeah, it's been. Yeah,
well, thank you. And it's just because I like, the only reason is all this stuff has happened. The main reason is because I do it.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I do the comic.
Yep.
The other things come, like you said, some luck, some timing. Sometimes you push it to it, but I got a movie. I started my own conventions. The book is being read in colleges, and I've been invited to speak in museums and libraries, but I always got to go back home and make the next comic, and because that's what it all comes from. That's what it's all about. And as a kid, when I'm reading Steve Ditko comics, and I love this guy's stuff, and then you follow him I guess I've been following him 40 years, and then he's still making comics in his, when he was alive in his 80s. He's self-published. little crazy comic book stories that he'd do, 32 pages. And him and his partner, Robin Snyder, they would go to a Kickstarter model probably for the last half of these. And, you know, so my name's somewhere in all the, you know, Kickstarter, you're a backer. So like,
awesome.
I think today that, man, if I knew, I mean, not that if I knew, but 10-year-old kid reading his comics, and then, you know, here's a middle-aged adult, you know, like you're one of the backers printed in one of his independent comics. Yeah, you don't know what path, you have no idea what path your life is going to take, or in our case, our comic life. You know, I during the filming, I had to go pick up Michael Parks, the legendary actor who showed up Tarantino movies as the sheriff, and I picked him up at his townhouse because they didn't have a PA that day. So the producers all reluctant, like Susan's like, because I hate to ask you, like, can you pick him up? And at first I was like, oh man, I don't want to go pick up some dumb actor. I go, okay, we're a small film, and I picked him up. He gets in my car. It's like, oh my God, that's the guy from the movies. And he throws his, you know what I mean? It's like, I drive up to his place. He's wearing jeans and a blue t-shirt. He's got one of those funky nylon jeans. It's like I was picking him up for a construction job.
Yeah.
And he gets in my car, he throws his script on the dashboard and throws his jacket in the back. And we're driving, and I go, oh, Michael, I don't know if they told you. So I'm the creator of the comic book that the movie's based on. And he's like, oh, is that so? You know, that voice he has. And then and so he reaches back to the dashboard, and then he gets the script, and then he looks at it again, because at the bottom it says based on the comic. And I told him really quick how the movie came about, the interview and stuff. And then he looked at, and this guy's got like 60 years in the film. He's all, you're very lucky. Like, the things don't happen that quick as far as like getting a movie, you know. It, like, shit, if he says it, it's definitely true. And here's another great story. I mean, the guy passed away, right, some years ago, but he's immortalized in our film. And again, so many all these cool films he did with Tarantino, Rodriguez, Kevin Smith, and his whole career before that. But we're driving, and he goes, "Man, I smoke," and I hate smoking. Like, you know what I mean, smoking next to me in my car. So I go, sure, go ahead. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Because you don't say no to the guy. He's being so nice. And so he pulls his cigarettes out of his pocket, and then he looks at the ashtray, flips it open, and then he shuts it, puts the cigarettes back. No one smokes in this car. It's like, I get choked up.
Awesome.
Tell that story, because how much, like, he's an actor. Actors are supposed to do whatever they want, right? Hey, I'm going to smoke. The guy said, like, wow. So I dropped him off on the set, and then he walked, you know, I walk him to the set, and then I walk, okay, Michael, I'm going to take off and go do nothing, go to the craft service table, be an associate producer. He goes, here, are you going to take me home? Sound like a little kid, like you drop off at the park. Are you going to take me home? I go, I don't know. I think they got PAs now, and but I'll see you again on the set. So next time I saw him on the set, he just winked at me, like, my buddy Michael.
That's class, man.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Scott's saying, you don't know where you're going to end up.
Yeah,
just drawing some silly comic one night, you know. But do you want to do the comic, not because you want to hang out with cool guys like Michael Parks, but that might happen. So accept it,
dude. And I gotta say, like, you know, Hav, like, I met you, like I said at the top, like when I was green to this whole thing, and I still to this day remember just your encouragement in like me doing it. That actually kind of helped me get over that hurdle of like putting out your first book and being at your first convention where you're like totally unprepped and you sell like 2 copies and you're like, nobody cares. You know, it was, I don't even remember specifically what you told me at the time, but I remember our conversation being so positive that I just felt fuel to like kind of keep going.
Well, I'm so glad you're saying this. I mean, I'm so glad that I reacted that way to you, and that's good.
Yeah, but I mean, like, that's kind of the thing is like, I think that's sort of the thing with comics is like, it's sort of a thing where if you're going to get into it, like you keep putting stuff out there and then weird stuff happens. Like, and the more you kind of put out there, like the more those possibilities kind of spring up, but also like the more you do for other people, like you were just describing with that actor where it's like, hey, like maybe I don't smoke in this car. 'Cause like it, you know, I think that's also a good thing to kind of consider too. So that's awesome. Just what a cool, awesome story you have. Sweet. Well, I don't know if there's anything we didn't touch on, Hav, that you wanted to like hit or talk about. Is there anything?
We leave it for another episode, but yeah, I'm glad you picked some good, various points in the trajectory of my stumbling through the comics biz and life in general. It's like I feel like a little ball in the pinball game. Just
well, hopefully we can have a more targeted kind of discussion again, and we're gonna have you back on again because just what an inspiring story, great artwork. You guys all should check out Hav's stuff. I'm just gonna throw this out there again. This is the direct link. Like, go there and buy some of Hav's comics and check them out.
They can even find the book on Amazon. I know like people like to just order, just click on your Amazon. Just look up Javier Hernandez, Days of the Dead.
Dude, if you have Prime, free shipping, go for it, guys. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, and definitely make sure you guys check out what Hav's doing and also keep an eye out because that convention might happen soon, might not, but this day and age, things are starting to open up again. So who knows?
Yeah, we're in flip right now. So it's going to happen. Just see if it happens in person or online or hybrids. But I want to thank you and Scott having me on, but also thanks for what you guys do. I mean, almost 300 episodes of you guys spotlighting different artists, new artists like your guy last week, old artists, just motivating people to work on their work. So you're doing a good service, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
We'll have to. I'd like to have you back on after you do the Steve Ditko convention. See how that all went.
Oh man, I'm sure there's gonna be beautiful stories to tell. Yeah. So yeah, sure. Bring a Kleenex.
Oh man, Ditko. You know what? We should just have you on an episode to just talk Ditko because I would be super into that.
This man who gave us Spider-Man, his entire cast. Gave us Doctor Strange, the Creeper, but I'll save that talk. Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. There's so much crazy, awesome Ditko stuff we could talk about. I'm excited about that. So we'll have to have you back on to talk about that or whatever. But thanks to everybody who showed up in the chats too. Scott, thank you for doing this remote. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but this whole time Scott is not even in the same state he's usually in.
I'm in the
Who knew? This is crazy. We're all in the same state.
He wanted to be just close to our energy because I got to go to California for this. I'll go back after this, but he had to be here.
That's true. Scott, you're never going to want to go back because we have the best weather. We just do.
Well, yeah. I mean, we do get a little hot, but typically we have pretty good weather.
But. Yeah, Cali's better. Anyhow, so I'm just noggin. All right. So Hav, before we kind of wrap, I guess where can everybody find your work and stuff like that, and how can they support what you're doing?
Yeah, Instagram, Javier Los Comics. You can go to my site, havzilla.com or elmuerto.com. I have all the links to, or even on my YouTube channel here. I got links to my Facebook, my Twitter. I always try to post every day on social medias. Check out my YouTube channel. I review a lot of manga, a lot of Go Nagai. We could talk about that guy later. And talk about sometimes I draw on camera. So appreciate everybody's support and support other indie comics, independent creators. So thanks everybody for joining us. Do appreciate it very much.
Awesome. And then I'm just going to wrap by saying, if you guys haven't yet, after you bought El Muerto, that's key. Make sure you pick that up. But also, you can pick up 2 stories. Book 1, it's my memoir about faith, mental illness, depravity, and ultimately redemption in a fallen world. It's like slice of life, indie comic, black and white, all hand-lettered, hand-inked, and handed to you in prints. So while you're on Amazon, once again,
get both books. Get both
Prime, free shipping, and if you bulk it together, it's like you get it all in one package. Two cool comics. But make sure you get El Muerto first because it's legendary. And then let's see, Scott. I get confused here. First off, if I'm trying to learn more about cartooning, how can I kind of do that? Are there any kits that are recently on sale for that? And then after that, how the hell do I keep a track of this Artcasters thing? Because it's on my channel this week. It's on your channel next. How do I know how to keep track?
Yeah, so first of all, like Josh mentioned, if you want to learn more about making comics, I have a series on my YouTube channel. It is just search Circworks on YouTube, and you'll find the the making. I've got so many different products. It's Making Comics 101. It is a series. There's about 70 episodes in the series, and you can kind of pick and choose or whatever. And there's your basic episode that'll give you the topic, and then each one of those basic episode has like a quick tip and also an in-depth kind of workshop type thing. But anyway, it's called Making Comics 101, and just you can start from the beginning, or you can just say if I just want to learn about inking, go to the inking episodes. But it'll teach you everything you want to know, including lettering. And another way, if you want to learn lettering, I just launched this right here. The Comic Lettering Masterclass. Right now, it is only on Design Cuts. Now, this one is for Procreate. Eventually, I will do one for Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop. But if you use Procreate, you want to learn how to hand letter. I mean, it's basically like a combination of a textbook on lettering comics. It'll take you through the history, the art of all that stuff, and it also has tools to kind of help you. It's got all kinds of brushes, like with word balloon shapes, so you can set up, use brushes to set up all your word balloon. I mean, it's got all kinds of stuff, but it is it's exercises, it's tools, and it's just basically a masterclass digital in a box, not actually in a box, but the proverbial box. But yeah, you can go to designcuts.com, and until we get it promoted and get it on the front page there, just search Circworks on there and you'll find it. It'll be in my shop over there. So yeah. Awesome. And then and as Josh said, we do this show every single week. It bounces back and forth from Josh's channel to my channel. We always have a different guest. Typically it's on Thursday nights, but sometimes it'll be on a different night. But if you want to know exactly when we're going to be live, who the guest is, all that stuff, join our mailing list. And we don't spam you or anything like that. Usually about 30 minutes before we go live, we'll send that out via email, and you can click on it. And that's the best way to just be notified when we're going to put these out, because YouTube doesn't always notify you. And hopefully the email went out today. Because I set it up because I did it back when I was home before I left out here, and I scheduled it to go out. So if it didn't, sometimes they don't go out, but most of the time they do. So just, that's, like I said, that's the best way to get involved and find out when we're going to go live. And the other thing is, I just wanted to say thanks to the chat. I didn't, because the way I'm set up, I didn't get to actually read the chat because I don't have it pulled up here. But thanks to the chat. Thanks for coming on and everything. And keep making comics.
Okay, and then Frank said he got the email, so I guess you did it right.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks everybody in the chats. Thanks again, Hav. And we will see you guys next week. And definitely make sure you're following Hav, especially on YouTube, because it's a good channel, and he's doing reviews and walkthroughs of comics he enjoys, as well as step-by-step tutorials. And like I said, a veteran in the field definitely can learn a lot from following Hav's channel on YouTube. And thanks to everybody who's participated. Thank you, Javi, for agreeing to be on here. It's a pleasure, and we'll have to have you back shortly. And we will see you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes. All right. Bye, guys.